My name is Nancy Morris, now Johnson. I'm from Buckingham County. And I wanted to say, in 1960, I was like maybe 8 years old. In the seventh grade, we had the choice of whether all the families, black and white, had the choice of coming together as one in schools. And I was like, in the seventh grade, like I said, and it was like maybe three of us. I was the first one, only black, in my bus. What we endured, or what I endured, was a lot of disappointment. And I have to say, because we have our leaders that tells us what we need to do, and they didn't step the I would say step in those footsteps. But there were some, like my mom and dad, that pushed me to do this, and I'm glad I did, because when I did go into the schools, I was maybe not accepted as much as far as the students, but I did have a teacher named Ms. Wingo, and she was a phenomenal teacher. She taught me. I was like a grade behind. I was making A's and B's in the regular black schools, but there I was just barely making C's. And she came and she taught me and tutored me. You know, we always talk about how the bad part of it, but that was a good part of my life as far as her teaching me and getting me ready. And when after 61, everybody came together, I was a little bit more advanced than when they came, because no one was prepared for what we were getting. The schools had more equipment. They had a lot of learning resources you could go to than the black schools. It was a bad time, because a lot of times, as far as the bus, I was labeled. I was like the lady was talking to me. It was like maybe I wasn't spit on, but I was thrown at or whatever. Those were people that were taught by their parents and grandparents that black people weren't anything. We as a black people have to come together and show these people that we are just as equal as they. And I'm almost forgot my age. I'm 58 years old, and I'm going to school, and I'm trying to get my master's in human services. And you're never too late. And from my granddaughter on up to other people's children, I'm setting an example. You never stop. Never stop. Always continue to get yourself into a better level. They say you can't do it. I'm here to tell you you can do it.
Ready?
Yes.
Thank you. And your name again?
Nancy Morris Johnson.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ready?
I am Ira Luck II, age 73. I'm originally from Danville, Virginia. I presently live in Newport News, Virginia. I've lived in Newport News since 1968, when integration came to the schools in Danville. Most of the schools were integrated when I left, so I decided to come to the Tidewater area to pursue my career. However, I taught in Danville after discharge in the military in 1965, after serving 2 years in the United States Army. I was an infantry soldier, served 2 years overseas in Germany, Baumholder, Germany. I've been in education. I won't say anymore because you want me. When I was discharged from the military in 1965, I worked at my former high school, Southside High School in Blairs, Virginia, as a social studies teacher. I taught there taught social studies, and also coached basketball and football for 5 years. After being there in Danville, I decided to come to Tidewater area. When I arrived in Newport News, Virginia, I chose the Hampton School System, where I was a 6th grade teacher until I was promoted as an assistant principal of elementary schools. I remained an assistant principal for 13 or 14 years until I was promoted principal of Caesar Tarrant Elementary School. I've worked at all levels of the curriculum, including high school, middle school, as well as elementary, where I first started as a 6th grade teacher in the Tidewater area.
So what was it like when you were teaching at the first integrated school? And
The first integrated school, when I was interviewed for the position, I was asked by the director of personnel if I was afraid to go to an all-white school to teach. And I told her then that I wasn't afraid because I had just been stationed in Germany where I was in an integrated situation as a soldier. Therefore, it was not challenging for me to be a 6th grade teacher. I was the first in the Hampton school system to be assigned as a 6th grade teacher in my school. So I really broke the ice for many males because I don't think anyone had ever taught in an integrated school at Luther W. Machen, which was the first. It was a new school. But I had no problems at all because I had a reputation in the community as a good disciplinarian. So I received all of the discipline problems because of being a strong disciplinarian that apparently followed me from a military experience because I received a citation from the United States Army congratulating me on being Soldier of the Month for several months, as well as leading my team, basketball team, to a division basketball championship. So all of that in my record had to impress the school personnel that I was a good disciplinarian because I had control of people and I knew how to lead and maintain discipline. So therefore the word got out in the community that I was a good disciplinarian, and parents who had troubled boys, especially those who were discipline problems, they would automatically request that the students would be assigned to me because they needed help. And many times those parents' husbands were in the military and the females had to discipline the boys and they couldn't do a good job of disciplining them. So therefore I ended up with more than my share of discipline problems each year that I worked at Luther W. Machen School. Not only that, but I feel that being a good disciplinarian, the word must have gotten out in the city of Hampton because I was assigned to many middle schools where there were discipline problems, especially at, I won't call the name of the schools because I'm not going to personate the school, but there were severe discipline problems coming from several schools in the city of Hampton. So therefore, I was more or less a troubleshooter. I would go to different communities to serve as an assistant principal to assist school administration when there were severe discipline problems. So I had no problem working in an integrated situation because of my experience in the military. I had served in an integrated situation in Germany. So therefore it was very easy for me to, it was not a problem, although I was asked by the personnel director if I had any concerns, would I be willing to take an integrated situation.
now, what were the students like? Were the students, you kept saying they having a lot of disciplinary problems. Did the children, the black children and the white children have a lot of fights or a lot of gangs like we have now? Or what was happening with the students back then?
At the time I taught 6th grade, there were no fights, not any fights. You would probably have some misunderstanding during recess when we would go out for physical activity, but as far as what we have today, where you have to have police officers stationed on campus in a patrol car, we didn't have any of that. None of that was ever present, not during my whole time at Luther W. Machen. But when I was asked to go to many of the junior high schools, it was just like a war zone. At many of the schools that I went in as an assistant principal, we had to be in the hall all day long to break up fights.
Between blacks and whites, or?
No, it didn't have anything to do with racial overtone. It had more or less to do with that just being, I guess, maybe a teenager, and it'd be typical of young people when they would have, I wouldn't say gangs, but they had just misunderstanding coming from different communities, and they did not know how to assimilate well. So therefore, they would have their own hang-ups as for certain communities or certain location, and they would get there and resolve their problems at school instead of resolving within the community. So it was just one of those situations that that school that I was assigned to, I'm not going to call the name of the school, but it had a reputation for as many fights. So that's why I feel that central office sent me there, because they knew that I had a military background. I was good with discipline. So I went to, I would say, 3 or 4 middle schools to assist because of disciplinary problems they had. But as far as racial overtone, as far as black and white getting along, there was no, that didn't have anything to do with the fights.
So when you were teaching there, the school had been integrated for a while, or?
No, the school that I taught, Luther W. Machen, I was the first black male to be assigned or to integrate. Now, it was a new school. I was there, so it hadn't been integrated. But I was the first to go there when the school first opened. So it was not.
So it was an all-white
situation.
school?
It was predominantly white community, and I could almost count. I would say it would be about 6 blacks in my class, and the rest of them would be, I would average, and we have 29 students, but it would be on the part of maybe, because they weren't, and these blacks who were there were bussed in. They weren't in that community. They were bussed into that community. So therefore, that's how they balanced. They had the racial balance because they were bussed in. But as far as the community, it was predominantly white. The school was predominantly white. The principal was white. The staff members, I think we may have had 3 black teachers on my entire staff. But the school was predominantly white, and if you were chosen to go there, you had to be considered to be a good teacher, because the word would get out. They just would not tolerate a mediocre teacher there. It would have to be a top-notch teacher, and at that time I consider myself to be one of the very best in the city of Hampton.
So what were the schools like segregated schools like in Danville?
Well, when I grew up, I went to a 2-room school. That was the I would call it grammar school. 2-room school. You had a pot belly heater in each classroom. You have 1 teacher in each side of this 2-room school. We had to go out and get wood to make a fire in this pot belly stove so that we would stay warm. And I could have gone to Stonewall Jackson. I could have walked to Stonewall Jackson School, but because of segregation, I was not allowed to go to Stonewall Jackson, which I could have walked there in 10 minutes. So therefore, I went to a predominantly black school. It was called Camp Grove Elementary School, which was a 2-room school divided with 2 teachers. So I could have gone to Stonewall Jackson. When I finished the elementary school, which was 1 through 6, I went to Southside High School because I lived in the county. I didn't live in the city. I went to Southside High School, which was a county school. That was from 6th through the 12th grade. 6th through the 12th grade. That school was predominantly black because of segregation. There was not a white student in that entire school. Again, many times I would pass, catching the bus to go to Southside High School, I would pass by Stonewall Jackson, which was on the corner of Main Street and Bradley Road. It was right on the corner of the intersection of Bradley Road and Main Street. Now, I was bused approximately 25 minutes, which I could have walked to Stonewall Jackson in 8 minutes because of where I live in Camp Grove Place. But because of segregation, I couldn't have gone to Stonewall Jackson. But they did not allow us blacks to go there.
Now, did you know of anybody that went to schools that actually, once the Stonewall Jackson was integrated?
I can't recall because I'm sure that I left Danville in '68, and I'm sure that Stonewall Jackson was not integrated in '68. Integration came about gradually at certain schools which were politically handpicked. They knew where they wanted to integrate. When I say they, I'm talking about the school board members and city council members knew. They selected the schools they wanted to integrate. And I'm certain that because of the location of Stonewall Jackson, that Stonewall Jackson was not chosen in 1968 to be integrated. So at the time that I left Danville, I am not certain that I could give you adequate feedback as to what schools were integrated when I left in 1968 to come to the Tidewater area. But I can assure you they were hand-picked in a predominantly white community, and the students, if they were chosen, they were hand-picked to go to this integrated school. That is the political setup that has always existed in America. They will never integrate a school in a community they feel that the white students will be threatened or be intimidated by black students there. So they will always, it's almost like in the political system now, you draw your lines so that you can determine the outcome of the vote. And I'm sure that's what they did at the time when they did integrate the schools in Danville. They knew what schools they wanted to integrate.
Now, can you tell me,
You would have those,
when you were a teacher, what was it like teaching students that were white?
you had to be on your P's and Q's. When I say on your P's and Q's, you had to be very sharp because there would always be spontaneous undertow or undercurrent things occurring in your classroom, and you had to nip it in the bud right then. There would be some smart, I wouldn't say smart student, but there would be some student who possibly would bring his hang up from home and try it out on the teacher. So I can assure you that if you're not a good disciplinarian, those students who come there with their bigotry or hatred toward blacks would take over and will destroy your career. So you have to be firm and fair and know how to nip it in the bud when it does occur. You do it in a professional manner, but you don't do it in a hateful, despiteful manner that will sort of spill over and be the epitome of the problem itself. In other words, you don't want to act like the student. If the student has a problem, you don't want, as a teacher, behave the same way. So you have to know how to nip it in the bud professionally without being called a racist or being labeled by the parents as a racist teacher.
What about your coworkers? Did you get much support or camaraderie from your coworkers or your principal?
Okay, I had excellent support from the principal. That was, at the time, I taught at Matron. I don't recall ever any friction between co-workers and the principal. Only on one occasion that I can recall that I had to put my principal in his place when he made a racial slur during an assembly, and I didn't appreciate it, and I made it known right then on stage when he made the statement that some of the students were behaving as if they lived across the tracks. And that was the implication that people who lived across the railroad track were more or less from the ghetto. And because I had served my country 2 years, I was not going to condone that type of remark coming from my principal. So when he made the remarks at the closing of an assembly, said that some of the students were behaving in the assembly just like they were lived across the track, I followed up my remarks right on stage. And the teachers came to me and thanked me for saying that, because the principal was wrong for labeling some of the students for their bad behavior that they lived across the tracks. And I made it known right then to the audience. It didn't have anything to do with where you live as to your behavior. And that's the only incident that I can recall that had racial overtone.
Okay. Now, what do you think, just your opinion, did integration help the black community, or some people may say integration hurt the black community as far as having students excel in an environment that was often volatile in some counties and parts of Virginia? What would you say your assessment as being an educator, administrator would be?
My overall opinion of integration is like a sword. It has pros and cons. In some respect, it was good. In other respect, it shortchanged us, because there were many white teachers who were, I would say, not fair to our black population. Many of them, I guess, I would always say to myself, would sort of shortchange the black male, because they felt that they would teach the black male well, that they would be threatened by his knowledge. So therefore, I saw as an administrator, as a teacher, that many of the white teachers would sort of limit the amount of knowledge they would give to the black student. Now, this is not true all across the board. I have observed some instances of white teachers being poor disciplinarian. Instead of trying to find out the behavior problem of the student, they would just put them outside the classroom in a chair and give them a book to read, instead of trying to find out the behavior problem, of trying to find out the learning modality of that child. How can I get through to this child to help this child grow? Now, on the other hand, if it hadn't been for integration, many of our students would have been shortchanged. They still would be using the outdated textbooks. I do know I'm a product of books that came from Stonewall Jackson School that were passed to Camp Grove School that had been used by the white students. I do know that I have sat in desks and other things that have been passed on from the white school to the black school. So that's why I say that integration has its pros and cons. There's some things about integration is good, and there's some things about integration bad, and I can give you a litany of both sides, and I do not want to, because time will not permit me to give you the pros and cons of integration. But I can assure you that the final analysis of integration, I would say it has been a plus, because without integration, we have been led, when I say we, as black people, and my parents have been led, to just because of a person being Anglo-Saxon or Caucasian, that they're automatically superior. So my experience as a teacher, I have found out for myself that it doesn't have anything to do with the color of your skin, about the amount of intelligence you have from experience. I've seen just as many nitwits who are Caucasian as many as Afro-Americans who are nitwits. I don't mean to belittle or belabel anyone or call anyone a nitwit, but I'm just saying there are inferior on both sides. But again, back to your original question, there are pros and cons on integration. And I can give you I can balance the scale on both sides.
All right. Well, thank you, Ira Luck. Appreciate. Okay. Introduce yourself.
I'm Katie Scott Luck. I'm originally from Enfield, North Carolina. I first started my career in teaching in Enfield, North Carolina for 2 years. Then I moved to Newport News, Virginia, and I taught in Hampton until retirement. I taught grades 2 through 4th, mostly 3rd grade children.
And what is your understanding about integration in Virginia schools?
Well, when in Hampton, the teachers were integrated first. They chose certain teachers to go to white schools to teach. It was said by many people that they chose the lighter skinned black to go to the white schools to teach. We were not really welcomed in the white school. We went, and you had to be considered an excellent teacher for them to choose you to go to a white school to teach. And I do consider myself as having been an excellent teacher. When we went to the schools, we were not welcomed by the faculty nor the community because they had been used to having all white teachers in the schools and all white students. So the teachers would go to the lounge and they would have conversations about black children and integration. And I would make it my business to go to the lounge every day at lunch to hear what they were talking about. I was told that by one teacher, white teacher rather, we don't want our children to marry black children. And of course I replied, we don't want our black children to marry white children either. I had lots of trouble with some parents because they were not ready for integration. Children would go home and they would ask them questions and put ideas in their head, and you really had to be on your P's and Q's and document anything that happened in order to keep yourself clear, because they would do anything to try to get you out of there.
So what were the white students like as students? Did they respect you, or did they learn? Is students learn today, or was learning back then different?
They were good students. They did respect me because whenever I start the year with a new class, I immediately form my rules, let them know what I expect of them. They know the rules. We call them our rules. And I had no trouble with the students learning. They were good students, and I enjoyed teaching them just as much as I enjoyed teaching my black students.
What were any issues in your school that you knew about, or any schools in your school system when integration of the students actually started?
Not in the school where I was, but there were other schools where there were some problems. Mainly the schools where the you would have to bus them to integrate as children. And it depended on the neighborhood in which they lived in. And if they were discipline problems in the school, then that's where you would have a lot of problems. But it was not because of racial tension, I don't think, because the children I taught, they didn't even know anything about race. I'm sure their parents, they hear their parents talking certain things. For instance, I had 2 little boys one time, and it was a black one and a white one. And the little white boy called the little black boy, "Your cracker." He didn't even know what he was talking about. And so they didn't know anything about integration, and it was just only the adults that made the problems.
Do you know of any, do you think Virginia or Hampton was different compared to North Carolina schools where your brother went to school when he had to integrate, or other relatives had to integrate schools? Do you think Virginia was different from North Carolina, or what is your understanding of Virginia schools during integration?
I think Virginia schools were more progressive than in Enfield, North Carolina. And they integrated before they did. So I think it was much better in Hampton, Virginia. Not all of Virginia now, but Hampton. It was run very smoothly. Now Newport News, that's a different story. But Hampton was like a forerunner in integration.
And when you said what happened in Newport News, what's your understanding of what happened there?
Well, in Newport News,
So close by.
In Newport News, they said they were going to close down the whole school system if they integrated. Now that was when I first got there, and I didn't know very much about the Newport News school system.
So did they close it, or you don't know?
I don't think they did.
Okay.
But there were many civil rights meetings and things like that going on at that time.
And what is your impression overall about integration versus segregation? Do you think integration actually helped black students more, or helped build better communities, and mixing of the races aided and supported better, building better bridges between the races?
Yes, I think integration helped in a lot of ways. As far as relationships between the races, I think we learned that, well, in my day, we were taught that we thought that white people were smarter than we were. We were told that. And when I started teaching, I found out, no, it's the same. You have smart blacks, smart whites, some that has learning problems, all kind of problems. So it's no difference in our learning abilities. The only thing I see remember about this 2 different schools, integrated and not integrated, was the discipline. Whites did not know how to discipline our children, or matter of fact, their children. And they came up, they always talked about having a timeout corner, or a timeout chair, timeout time period. back in the day when I was teaching, you used a paddle, a meter stick, and you gave them a paddling in their hand. But you didn't dare touch a white child. So you had to change your discipline procedures. And that was, our children were not used to the timeout. And so the white teachers couldn't discipline our children. So they caused lots of problems. And they would put, just because our children were causing lots of problems, they would put them in special ed classes. They would put them in a corner or put them outside the door because they were discipline problems. And that's how a lot of them ended up in special ed classes when they didn't really need to be in special ed. They just only needed some individualized instruction. So I think that integration helped because we learned to recognize that we are just as intelligent as any other race of people. Integration helped us to get along better in our communities. Integration helped us to, in the black schools, to get materials just like the whites instead of inferior, old materials, old buildings, that type of thing. So we got to go to better schools, you get better materials because of integration.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. Look.
Yes, ma'am.